This story is about a family who gave all the property to the eldest son and expected the youngest son to fulfill all the responsibilities. They ended up severing ties with the in-laws. After overturning this unfair situation, what could have happened? Let's take a look together. Please subscribe and like our channel.
We are a dual-income couple with a child, married for 10 years. I vented my anger fiercely at my brother-in-law and father-in-law. But I feel that my anger has not yet fully subsided. I wonder if it's because of my bad temper. I believe I've done everything I could for them. Our couple has done more for the in-laws than my brother-in-law and father-in-law. On the surface, it seems like the issue has been resolved neatly. But sometimes my anger flares up and I can't sleep. Originally, we planned to have more than one child. Both my husband and I earn a decent salary. So we thought it wouldn't be impossible to have 3 children if we continue to work together. Both of us love children, so we've discussed having as many children as our financial situation would allow. However, due to financial circumstances, we only had 1 child. I'm not sure if we'll be able to have more children in the future due to my age. My father-in-law and brother-in-law married 3 years before us. When we got married, my mother-in-law didn't show much interest in us. She said, "I have nothing, so you guys handle it on your own." Since both my husband and I had saved up a considerable amount of money from our work, we were confident. We thought we could afford rent, living expenses, and wedding costs if we combined our efforts and took out a small loan. We thought that if we lived frugally while earning, we could pay off the loan in a few years. And as we raise children and save more money, we could even buy a house. Before our marriage, my mother-in-law always said that her eldest son had struggled a lot for the family. She treated her 2 sons differently. My brother-in-law was the son who had suffered a lot for the family after my father-in-law passed away. And my husband was seen as the immature younger son. But that was not the case at all. Our father-in-law passed away 2 years before our marriage. When the property was sorted out after his death, it turned out to be about $1 billion, approximately $750,000 in total. I heard that all the property went to my brother-in-law. My husband didn't think much of it at the time. He thought that if his brother took all the property, he would take care of all the family affairs, and in the future, he would also take care of their mother. From when my husband was young, my mother-in-law differentiated between her 2 sons. She pampered the eldest son because he was the eldest, and she wasn't very interested in the youngest son. So my husband, who grew up receiving such treatment, couldn't say much about all the property going to his brother after his father passed away. When my father-in-law passed away, my husband and I were in a relationship, and I also attended the funeral. At that time, I heard about the property from my husband. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law always said that my brother-in-law and father-in-law had struggled a lot for the family. From my perspective, we struggled more. Of course, my brother-in-law paid a lot of attention to the family affairs. But isn't it natural for an eldest son who received $1 billion of property to do that much? My mother-in-law always said that my sister-in-law worked hard, but she never did anything for the in-laws' family. When my sister-in-law missed family events due to pregnancy, childbirth, child-rearing, and work, I did everything alone. Even when I was heavily pregnant, I worked whenever there was something to do at my in-laws' house. If there's a daughter-in-law who worked hard for the in-laws' family, it would be me, not my sister-in-law. But my mother-in-law never thanked me. Only worried about my sister-in-law who missed family events. Only my husband thanked and appreciated me. I was heartbroken, but I endured. It often felt strange working with my brother-in-law at my in-laws' house. He would order me around, saying, do this, do that. I understood him to some extent, but sometimes he also asked me to do personal errands. For instance, while we were all sitting in the living room drinking tea, he asked me to go to his room and bring his bag, or asked me to go to the master bedroom and bring a band-aid. I felt bad when he asked me to run errands like this. One day, I told him not to ask me to do such petty errands. He just glared at me without saying much. But since then, he stopped asking me to do such things. About 2 years after our marriage, my mother-in-law had surgery. It wasn't a dangerous surgery, but since it was a major one, she was hospitalized for over a week. There was a caregiver, but I visited her almost every day after work. I also took care of her on weekends. Even then, she didn't thank me once. My husband was so angry, he apologized to me and asked if I wanted to cut ties with his family. At that time, there was a bit of tension between him and his brother. I said it was okay because we're family. I regretted that I should have cut ties then. Since then, my husband didn't want to go to his in-laws' house, unless it was a special day. When I said we should visit since she was alone, he replied coldly, "Why should I go when I'm not even welcomed?" He must have been hurt from the discrimination he experienced growing up, and probably felt resentment for not receiving a penny of the inheritance when his father passed away. How would he have felt when his brother was bragging about money in front of him? And I, unable to empathize with his feelings, urged him to go to his in-laws. I think I was trying to make myself comfortable. Not long before the holiday, this happened. My mother-in-law was hospitalized for a few days, and my brother-in-law called me to pay her hospital bills and increase her allowance. Since we got married, we've been giving her 100,000 won, approximate $75 a month. I know that my brother-in-law gives the same amount. He suggested that giving the same amount for 10 years seems unfair, and proposed we give 200,000 won, approximately $150 each. As her children, we can pay the hospital bills. But honestly, I didn't want to pay. Isn't it unreasonable for the person who took all the parental property to ask me to pay the hospital bills? And I didn't like the fact that my brother-in-law was determining the amount of my mother-in-law's allowance. I told him I couldn't do it. I could pay the hospital bills this time, but I would continue to give the allowance as before. He criticized me, asking how I could do that as her child. I didn't want to hear him anymore, so I said I was busy and ended the call. And then there was a big fuss when I went to my in-laws' house for the holiday. The day before the holiday, we finished preparing the food and were having dinner, when my brother-in-law brought up the subject of taking care of my mother-in-law. Earlier, while preparing the food, my mother-in-law said things that made me very angry. It seems she talked to my mother-in-law about the hospital bills and the allowance. My mother-in-law said to me that we are also her children. We can pay the hospital bills, and we can increase the allowance. So there's no reason to be angry with my brother-in-law. I didn't want to raise my voice, so I just listened. And then at dinner, my brother-in-law talked about it. He said that since my mother-in-law's health is continually deteriorating, we can't just leave her alone, and suggested we take care of her. He said we can't send her to a nursing home yet, and that we should take care of her, because we only have one child, while they have two. They have to take care of their children a lot, so it's hard for them to take care of their mother. It was funny when my brother-in-law said this because isn't he a parent too? He claimed to have taken care of all the family affairs as the eldest son. My husband's face looked really bad. I told my father-in-law that I was amazed at how he could say such ridiculous things so naturally, and that his courage was impressive. My father-in-law and brother-in-law looked surprised and just stuttered, while my mother-in-law raised her voice, saying, "What are you saying? I asked her if it didn't look to her like the eldest son, who had received everything, was trying to push the mother onto the younger brother. She said that my father-in-law had suffered a lot as the eldest son. But I asked what he had done compared to the property they received. My father-in-law and my brother-in-law did nothing, I said. I did more than my brother-in-law for the in-laws' family. And my father-in-law did no more for his children than pay more attention. I also said that we won't give an allowance to our mother-in-law in the future, because we haven't received anything. I said that she shouldn't expect anything from us in the future, and she shouldn't give us a penny either. And I said this to my father-in-law. I told him to show some conscience. I asked him if he was a child only when receiving property and treatment. But was he the same child when it came to taking care of his mother? I asked him how sad his father in heaven would be to see this. My mother-in-law shouted, "Have you finished talking?" I shouted back, saying that I didn't want to take care of such a worthless son, and that it was not pitiful for my husband. And I told my brother-in-law, "You've enjoyed everything you can. Now take responsibility for everything. My husband doesn't want to come here anymore, so you and my father-in-law can handle it." And I came home with my husband. My husband thanked me for saying what he wanted to say. My husband, who grew up thinking, if I do well, my mother will look at me. And I, who thought, if I do well, my in-laws' family will recognize me, are not going to do it anymore. We think we've done enough.
It seems that the brother-in-law is a child who only knows how to receive and can't give anything in return. It seems like the writer made a good decision on behalf of her kind husband. What are your thoughts on this?